Hi, I'm John Fanning, CEO of Multimedia Engineering Corp. I'm here today to introduce International Grandmaster Roman Dzindzichashvili in a series of instructional chess videos. Before shifting his emphasis from playing to training, Roman was considered one of the top 10 chess players in the world. The chess training system that Multimedia has developed with Roman includes instructional chess videos and interactive chess software. How well does this system work? Well, I just finished a 6-game rated match with the USCF rated master. I won every game. We hope that you'll experience similar results. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Roman Dzindzichashvili. I am international grandmaster. It's Dzindzichashvili. I know it's difficult, but I'm not here to teach you how to pronounce my name. I'll teach you something much easier, how to play one very interesting opening, which I call myself, let's call it Roman opening. You can call it, you can put your own tag on it, so according to what your name is. So this opening is for black, d4, g6, and of course we know that white can continue here with move e4, or much more common is c4. c4 is more common than e4 because whoever plays you d4, he wants to play the closed opening, closed. So that's why they continue with d4 followed by c4, anticipating King's Indian or something like that. So after c4, bishop g7. Again, most common move is knight c3. This is the move you should be expecting maybe 90% of the time. Other moves here are e4 or knight f3. And again, on e4, black has a variety of continuations. They can go with d6 followed by knight c6. But we cannot cover now all these continuations. We probably will cover it in parts 2, 3, or 4. But what we want to do here, we want to go with the main move, knight c3. And now black plays c5, which automatically gives us almost new opening. No matter what white does here, black has, I think, very interesting game. Very interesting and position I personally like very much. I played it a number of times and I had very good result, maybe 80% I scored against very good players. So let's see what white's options are here. White can play d5, the most common move, d takes c, move that I do not recommend for white, knight f3, which gives black very comfortable position, and e3, that does not create any problems for black. Well, before we get to the main move d5, this is the main continuation for white, let's cover briefly other continuations, such as...
Hello and welcome back to our opening research series. This DVD is going to be a bit different from all the other DVDs we're going to do in this series, and I will explain you why. It's known in a theory that openings that were very popular several years ago, now forgotten because they did not have very good outcome, good results, and that's why one or the other side stopped playing it. Same thing with this opening that practically carries my name Well, that's how in most of the books it's known as a Dzindzi Indian. And nobody was supportive to this opening. I'm talking about c4, g6, knight c3, c5, d5, bishop takes c3, bc. Nobody was supportive to this opening more than I was. There were a lot of followers, a lot of grandmasters. Currently this is the, Igor Ivanov. Even one of the top players in the world, Morozevich, was playing it quite successfully. But then some games came up that kind of shattered the image of Dzindzi Indian. And now, with the help of high-powered analysis and much closer and different approach to it, I have to announce that the opening is back and fully on its feet, and you can play it. Well, if I was playing in active tournaments today, I would have played it, and I would have played, and I think you should too. There are quite a bit of upsides and downsides of this playing this opening. Now, this is going to be kind of a lengthy introduction to this opening because I want you to fully understand why we play this opening rather than Nimzo Indian or King's Indian or Slav or Grunfeld. Well, of course, this opening is not better than the other openings, but when you play something new, and this opening has a lot of very healthy positional ideas. It was just not doing well because when white was opening the game. But it has some very good and healthy ideas. As long as you don't get crushed, you're going to get positions that are more familiar to you, better known to you than to opponent. Strategy and maneuvering here is rather different than in the other openings. Those are the upsides. Some other upsides, I want to finish with upsides first. Some other upsides is that there is, with Ripka's help, some different ideas, some new ideas obviously found, and kind of innovative approach to it, and that also helps us to bring this opening to life. And not that I paid a lot of attention to statistics of this opening, result statistics, because statistics are overwhelmingly in black's favor. But again, this opening wasn't played. Hello. We have already produced the Dzindzi Indian DVD, d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5, d5, and bishop takes c3, bc, f5. So we have whole DVD on it, and very frequently white is not comfortable playing this opening, and there are several different ways they can avoid Dzindzi Indian. So, and this is going to be DVD on what do we do without getting to King's Indian or very old-fashioned opening. What do we do and how do we play when white avoids Dzindzi Indian. White can avoid several different ways. D4, G6. First of all, they can play E4. Well, if they play E4, we can go C5, we can go D6. Well, and that we cannot cover on this DVD every possible variation after this. But when white plays D4, G6, I want to follow with C4. And on bishop G7, after D4 and C4, what do we do if white avoids Dzindzi Indian? They can do it several different ways. First of all, they can still play knight C3. And when we go C5, now they can they can take on C5. B, they can go E3. And C, they can play knight F3. All these moves, they do avoid Dzindzi Indian. So, but luckily for us, with exception of a third move E4, none of the after C4 and C5, here is only one good move for white, and it's to allow Dzindzi Indian, because none of the other moves, they create any problems for black, and black gets very good game. Now, let's cover them one at a time. On D takes C, the move I like the best here is bishop takes C3, B takes C, and the queen A5. Now, the idea behind the queen A5 move, of course, we don't want to take the C3 pawn, because after that, white is going to control the diagonal from A1 to H8, so we don't want to let bishop to go on this diagonal sometime later in the game. Queen A5 is, we want to get the C5 pawn. We want to continue with knight F6. We can go queen A5 right away, or we can go knight F6 if we want to stop the E4 temporarily, but white still can go F3 and followed by E4. On queen A5, if white goes E4, we can go knight F6, attack the E4 pawn, which has to be protected now. The best way is F3. Notice, because if white goes E5, then black plays queen takes C3 check. Now it's okay to take C3 pawn, because you also win the central pawn on E5. That's not good idea for white to give up the central pawns. So after knight F6, F3, and basically the type of position we're going to get after queen takes C5.
The Dzindzi Indian is a very rare opening that's not seen a lot at the highest levels. And to me, as an advocate of the opening, that's absolutely fantastic, because not a lot of people are studying it. And why is this? Well, part of the reason is, in the background there have been rumors and murmurs about, oh, that opening's been refuted. But I doubt anyone could actually tell you what the, quote, refutation was. I actually prefer an opening that's not in the glare of the theoretical spotlight. Much less attention's paid to it. People don't have the latest Anand or Kramnik or Kasparov game to follow in terms of looking how to play against it. So many white players are very, very unprepared to meet it. And yet, it offers a dynamic imbalance. At a very early stage, black gives up his bishop, he doubles white's c-pawns. In databases, against almost every response, black has at least 50%, which is pretty amazing. And white does have a broad number of responses. However, there's only 2 or 3 responses that we actually consider to be theoretically challenging, perhaps e4, some attempts with h4, and an early queen a4. These look to be the most challenging theoretically, and in each case we will show you how to handle the position with black. With a careful study of this chess DVD, you will learn the plans, the tactics, the history of the Dzindzi Indian, and you will be able to win many, many games against very surprised white opponents. Hi, I'm International Grandmaster Ron W. Henley. Today we're going to look at a fantastic opening that you can play when white plays 1d4. It's called the Dzindzi Indian, named after Roman Dzindzichashvili. And it starts when white plays 1d4. d4 is a very good move for white. It helps to control the center. And we can see the e5 and the c5 squares. And with black, we respond with 1g6. We prepare to fianchetto our bishop to g7. White plays c4 and establishes a very nice pawn duo. This gives him control of e5, d5, c5, and b5 for the moment. For black, we fianchetto our bishop and we immediately begin to put pressure on white's d4 pawn. White plays knight to c3. This developing move has been chosen by white players about 67% of the time. From c3, we can see the knight influences the d5 and the e4 squares. And now, as black, we counterattack at the center. Our pawn on c5, combined with our bishop on g7, puts pressure on white's d4 pawn and immediately forces him to make a decision. d5 has been white's choice about 80% of the time. From d5, we can see that the pawn covers the c6 and the e6 squares, but this also opens up for our fianchettoed bishop on the dark squares and gives us the option of bishop takes knight check. In fact, this is kind of a key moment in establishing our Dzindzi Indian defense, is we do in fact give up our long-range bishop for the knight on c3. After bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, we can see white has these double pawns on c3 and c4, and white is ready to expand in the center with e2 to e4. And black also has these dark squares that are a little bit weak now because of the absence of his bishop that was on g7. With f5, we immediately fight for the light squares, and in particular the vitally important e4 center square. And this is the key starting position for the Dzindzi Indian. If allowed, black will now play d6, knight f6, queen a5, knight bd7, and then this is important. For d7, this knight can either go to e5 if available. As a rule, you want to go to e5 if it's available, or to b6. In either case, we can see that this knight immediately attacks the white pawn on c4. So let's say, for example, we have to put our knight on b6. Then the way we follow up our development is with bishop d7 and castles. This is the development plan for black. From here, he may look to advance his e-pawn. He may look to drop his queen back, attack the white pawn on c4. And black has, very, very good position. Now, of course, we made several moves for black. White will be trying to do something in the meantime. And what we will look at in this introduction is that once we reach this position with f5, we know what our plan is. We know where our pieces belong. We know what we're trying to do, but it takes 2 people to play a chess game. We will then take a look to see what white does, and we will meet each of his plans. So in this DVD, we will show you how to play the Dzindzi Indian, and we will cover all of the different pawn moves that white has on the 6 moves to try and make progress against our fantastic opening. You will learn the plans, the tactics, the history of the Dzindzi Indian, and you will be able to win many, many games against very surprised white opponents. So far we've looked at a couple of white's less aggressive, what I call non-threatening 6-move alternatives. But now we will look at something that has to be taken very seriously and what I consider white's possibly most promising method of meeting the Dzindzi Indian. And I'm talking about 6e4. Let's take a look. In fact, I call this the, quote, theoretical challenge. Why? Because after f5, we obviously have stated our intention to fight for control of the important e4 square, and also, of course, the g4 square. White's 6e4 is just a direct confrontational attempt to meet the Dzindzi Indian head-on. He opens the e-file, he offers a pawn, and he looks to keep the line open for his bishop to exploit our weakened dark squares on f6, g7, and h6 on the king side. White's primary idea with this is that after e4, f takes e4, then f3, again in conflict with our e-pawn. White offers a very promising pawn sacrifice to totally get rid of our influence in the center with our e-pawn. And again, our g7 square is pretty weak. We do have the possibility of queen a5. White's primary idea here is that after e takes f3, knight takes f3, bishop d3, castles, bishop g5, queen c2, and rook at a to e1, he'll have extremely rapid mobilization. Now, of course, black will be trying to do something meanwhile, but this is very easy to play, and this gambit is very dangerous for black to accept. All the earmarks of disaster here. Your king quite often can get hung up, the e-file is open. In fact, when this gambit was first introduced, black lost some pretty nasty games. And of course, this led to cries of refutation, Dzindzi Indian is unsound, and so forth. Even our founder, Roman Dzindzichashvili, had to put the opening in the garage for a little while to get it repaired. So let's take a quick look, though, at what are some of the drawbacks to this plan that white has. Well, first off, you are sacrificing a pawn with white. And as William Steinitz said, sometimes you take material not so much with the idea of holding on to it to death do you part, but rather with the idea of returning it at the proper moment in exchange for something else of value. The second point, though, to note is that white has very little pawn cover left for his king. That means that if black ever is able to mount a counterattack, it could be extremely, extremely dangerous for the white king because there's frankly nowhere to run and hide. The third point is very much like the same-ish in the King's Indian and other openings, Yugoslav attack, in the Dragon Sicilian, etc., where white plays an early f3, the diagonal h4 to e1 is left open. Since e4 is a logical and dangerous approach for white, which does try to meet the demands of his position, it therefore comes as no great surprise that in a survey of the Chess Mega Database 2010, games that were played, white did score only 54% though. So, that's better than in the passive variations, but still not as good as white scores across all openings. And it also shows that black obviously has plenty of resources. So, how should black proceed? Opponents. Why I love the Dzindzi Indian. After 17 moves with black, this is the type of position that we can reach. This happened in one of my training games. Here, I played queen takes pawn check, king takes, knight takes c4 check, king takes e4, bishop f5 check, king f3, bishop takes c2 discovered check. Now my opponent has a choice. He can either play king g2 as in the game, or king to g4. However, king to g4 is nicely met by bishop to d1, pinning and winning the knight. Notice the lack of coordination among the white pieces. So going back, after bishop c2 discovered check, my opponent played king g2. And now the king hunt is on. Knight e3 check, king h3. Note, of course, that king back to f1, rook f1 mate. So after knight e3 check, my opponent played king h3. Now, bishop f5 check. And again, he has two choices. But note, king h4, knight g2 check, king g5, and then the little quiet sealer, king g7. After rook b7, h6 mate.